Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be hosting this event, and we're here to discuss very important themes, defending democracy in challenging times. I'm reminded of the famous quotation by Lenin: there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And we seem to be living through such an experience now, where many different crises and consequences which we can only at this stage speculate on. It is a great honor to be having a conversation with Yorgos Papandreou about this agenda. He, of course, brings so much experience to these topics, both domestic and international. And I, like you, be very interested to hear his comments and his insights in this respect. George, perhaps the way to start would be to have your sense of the different crises that we're living through, their magnitude, their significance. People use the phrase in the social sciences, a polycrisis, to suggest that we have a mix of crises. Clearly, some may be short-term, but some are longer term. Some are potentially of much deeper consequence. How would you make sense of the current situation in terms of the potential impact that we're facing from different crises?
Thank you, Kevin, and let me just begin by welcoming you to Greece. Many times you've been here and we worked together in difficult times also when I was Prime Minister. But I see many friends, Michael Muller, Amr Moussa, Jeffrey Sachs, many others are here. Welcome to Greece and to this forum. Going to the crisis in democracy, I think, is what I am working with a lot now in the Council of Europe, and I'm head of this commission. I was elected to work on what are these crises, how are they, how is the backsliding of democracy, and why, and what are the new innovations or new ideas to really strengthen our democratic institutions. But democracy, one of the reasons that it was invented in the ancient times was to control, check the abuse of power, and build on the rule of law. And we are seeing that we are seeing a blatant, of course, abuse of power by Vladimir Putin with the invasion in Ukraine against a country that, with all its difficulties, was democratic, is democratic, and of course with the consequences, terrible consequences of war crimes. Bucha, we saw horror, and the consequences around the world, the energy crisis, and of course the food supply crisis, which I think will create new problems, possibly huge refugee movements from Africa and other parts of the world. But these are not the only abuses of power, I would say, that we are seeing in our world. We have been living in a globalized capitalist system which was somewhat unbridled and unregulated. And I think this is one of the big issues that I would like to highlight, is the capitalism has created great wealth, but also great inequalities around the world. Huge inequalities. It has created great wealth, but also has damaged our environment, amazingly. It has created great wealth, but also with a profit motive and not a motive to invest in human beings. We are seeing areas in the world where there are pockets of huge poverty, and then, of course, migration and refugees. It has created great wealth, and through that, however, also a concentration of power. Whether it's digital, whether it is the pharma industries, whether the agro-business, the energy, of course, oil and gas, the finance, and military industries, all these have huge power, and they have been able to influence our democratic institutions and decision-making either through legal lobbying or through illegal corruption. And we've seen corruption not only in these authoritarian states, but very much so even in our robust, supposedly, democracies. So we really have to rethink that. And now, of course, there is the issue of technology, too, and we can talk about that also.
You've raised a number of points, but I'm very interested to hear more about your Council of Europe Commission, which is looking into the challenges to democracy. This seems to be agenda setting. The idea is to change the narrative, change our intellectual understanding of what the challenges are. Could you tell us more about that?
It is the whole idea in the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe, for those who may not know, is 47 countries in the European sphere, the wider Europe, where we are, as an organization, was created before the European Union. Its high court is the European Court of Human Rights, where our citizens can refer to if they have not adequately been given justice in their own nations. And of course, it's working for three issues: democracy, rule of law, and human rights. We just expelled Russia, so we're 46 now. The last country that was expelled was Greece. And when I was a young resistance fighter in exile, which we fought for then.
What's the agenda for the Commission?
The agenda for the Commission is to look at all these new challenges. The theme this year in the Council is the backsliding of democracy. So what is it that is undermining our democracies? And what are the new ways we can deal with? How can we strengthen our institutions? How can we find also new forms of democratic participation, such as citizens' councils? Going back to the ancient Greeks, this has also been experimented in, let's say, with the European Union now. As the future of Europe has citizen councils. Ireland very successfully had a citizens' council before the referendum on the issue of abortion, but other countries too. I experimented with this in Greece. The issue of an e-agora, so we have the agora, but also looking at going back a bit to the basics of democracy and see how they are affected. For example, we have social media. So in ancient Greece, you had this concept of isegoria. Isegoria means everybody has an equal voice. And, well, if you look at the social media now, one hoped at one point, this was sort of a dream of democracy, of the internet, that everybody had an equal voice. But actually today we don't have an equal voice. You have these bots that multiply voices millions of times, and you think it's millions of people, and it's not. But you also see the concentration of power in there, in the social media, where either it could be private actors or state actors controlling or influencing. You see the fact that if you go back to the pnyx or the agora in ancient Greece, everybody had to debate with each other. Two different sides, many different sides. They had to be in the same place. Okay, ancient Greece had its negatives too. No women, they were slaves and so on. But as a principle, the citizens had to debate with each other. Today we don't have to do that. We can just build our little armies, our bubbles, cocooning in our social media, and not debate with the other side, but then finally polarize. And the algorithms play a role with this in polarizing. And of course we have the exploitation of our data. As some people have said, data is the new oil. We are giving money to these big digital companies. Why not? Why shouldn't we self-manage maybe our own data, as what Europe is hopefully trying to do? So these are some of these issues which I think...
absolutely fascinating. One of the challenges to democracy seems to be renewing citizen engagement. How can individual citizens become engaged in politics when traditional forms of political activity seem to be less attractive to young people? Do you see a role here for citizens' councils on many different issues? And are we looking to a politics actually where traditional structures, political parties, either have to adapt significantly or die?
Well, I think we have to look at it at different levels. And one of the problems, one is the international or the global level or the regional level, let's say in Europe, and then the local or national level. At the global level, I would see that we need some form of regulation in order to deal with these deeper inequalities. Going back again to Aristotle, to the ancients, he was talking about the need to have a strong middle class, basically to have a sense of justice and equality in our societies. And of course, both he and Plato just looked at all the stasis or the revolts in different cities, and they analyzed that if you had deep inequalities, you then moved towards demagoguery, and demagoguery possibly to mob rule, and from mob rule to tyranny. And we are seeing that, if there's a sense of frustration, a sense of people feeling injustice in our societies because of these inequalities, they will be looking for not trusting the system and not maybe trusting their neighbors and maybe putting their trust in some demagogue or some savior. And I think this is one of our issues we have to deal with. So we need to really, and I think this is where Europe can play a role, is look at how we humanize through regulation this global capitalism, or at least do it in our region. And secondly, I think that we need to have the will to entrust our citizens with ever difficulties. I mean, you did that in the UK, and maybe we didn't like the result of Brexit, but in the end, I think we need to find ways to allow for citizens' participation much more directly and much more constantly. Our parties have been sometimes over-bureaucratized. Citizens feel somewhat powerless in these very complex systems that are too big to fail, they were saying, these banks, but actually too big to be controlled. So they feel a sense of taking back control, which was the slogan of the Brexiteers. But that is not the way to take back control through isolation. It is actually through regulation and through more democratic processes.
And do you think Europe could agree on a regulation for the new social media? To put it in context, we're in a world in which there may be attacks on democracy through IT systems. We accuse Russia of interfering with democratic processes in the West, etc. But we also have multinational companies which are huge.
Well, it was Facebook that sold all this data to Trump organizations, or whatever was it, the Oxford Analytica, and that obviously influenced the U.S. elections in one way or another.
So can we expect effective regulation?
I think we need to look.
On that?
I think we need to look for effective regulation, not to undermine free speech, but to make sure that it is truly free and equal speech, as I said earlier, and knowing where it comes from. I think we also need to think about our own Facebooks that may be linked with parliaments. That would be like an e-agora where everybody could actually deliberate. We tried this. When I was Prime Minister, we did what we called a wiki, wiki laws, like from Wikipedia, where we put all our laws before they went to Parliament on the internet. We asked citizens to comment. Then they had to come back to the cabinet of ministers to discuss the proposals by our citizens, and then went to the Parliament. Now that was experimental, but we maybe need to think of a true e-agora where citizens have daily opinions on what is being legislated, what is being decided, but also regulate all these big companies that make laws through our applications. We are basically in these little phones. They are telling us how to behave, what prerequisites for one thing or another, whether you can get a loan or not. They are making legislation and it's not being legislated. But I would also say, since we are the data, why not self-manage our data? Why not have some form of, why don't we become stockholders or why don't we automatically become stockholders or shareholders in Facebook, or in these Facebooks, rather than
a different kind of relationship.
Approach, yeah.
I wonder if we come absolutely to the present and think of the Putin effects on democracy, the Putin effects on Europe. It seems to be a reminder of what Europe stands for, and it may somehow be bringing Europe closer together to realize what it is we're against. But I'm tempted to make the comment that tomorrow President Zelensky will be addressing the Greek Parliament.
That's true.
I will
be there.
Not all Greek members of Parliament will be present, as I understand it.
I'm not sure, but we will see.
Okay. But the point would be...
that's their democratic right. But it's also my democratic right to criticize that.
Absolutely.
If that happens.
Absolutely. But before we can tackle the challenges to democracy, we have to understand, we have to agree what those challenges are. And I wonder, ambivalence for some in Greece as to Putin's strategy in Ukraine. How much of a problem is this for a common sense of what Europe stands for?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it is a crossroads for Europe. I think that Europe, of course, has shown great unity for one maybe unexpected, and not simply because of the particular war with Ukraine. It's not just a Ukraine-Russian problem, but as you said, it's a question of values. Are we moving towards a situation where we have the rule of the powerful, or rule of law, power of law? And I think this is one of the major issues that we're facing. And Europe is based on the rule of law. Our Council of Europe, of course, where I am, of course, is based on the rule of law. We can change our laws, but it's based on the rule of law and democratic creation of laws. If we abandon that, or if that is undermined, we will go into a situation of the rule of the powerful, and then, of course, it will be a different type of a world. And if you think about this different type of a world with nuclear weapons and other types of weapons of mass destruction, we are creating a real doomsday and an apocalypse. And I don't want to be a doomsayer, but we have the talk about it, already by people like Putin.
And presumably,
whether it's a bluff or not, no one really knows. But still, so I think yes, and so Europe has been quite strong. I also would like to see a post-Putin time when we look more at a collective security in Europe, because we need to see how we get together. We're not against the Russian people, and I would like to see Russia integrated into a system where we can work together. China too, obviously, but now we need to see it in that way. And I would also like to see that because of this war, we don't say, okay, they're the bad guys, we're the good guys. Yes, Putin is the bad guy, but we have to make our democracies more robust too. So it's not just that everything is well and we just need a new defense system in Europe, which Greece has always been in favor of, and therefore militarization being the solution. No. Deepening our democratic institutions, building and strengthening our values, that is our real defense. And of course, that has to do with social equity, it has to do with sustainability and climate change, it has to do with an energy system which makes us more autonomous, it has to do with rethinking globalization. One other aspect of globalization, I think more and more, as we are interdependent, we are realizing that interdependence can be good if you share values. But if you don't share values, interdependence can be used geopolitically to undermine, to blackmail, to be used in different ways. So in some way, we will be seeing more, I would think, a tendency towards greater autonomy in energy, in food supplies, in health supplies. And maybe areas of globalization will be our commonwealth of knowledge and technology, our commonwealth of being stewards of our environment, which is commonwealth. So I think these are the new challenges we have. But Europe is at a crossroads, and it's not just us versus this bad guy Putin. It is also how we in Europe deal with these challenges. And when there is a sense of mistrust in a system, as I said earlier, people often look to saviors, and that would be destructive in my mind. So. And we see that in Europe. I mean, we saw Orban re-elected. They build on mistrust. The more you mistrust the person next to you, the more you're looking for some authority to protect you. So the more we build trust, and that means building types of democratic processes where people feel that they participate, they are informed, they have a voice, and they can trust a system. And I think this is what is our challenge.
Does it also mean that the European Union, presumably the agenda that you have for the Commission with the Council of Europe, is also on questions of how member states respect the rule of law?
Absolutely.
And of course, one of the challenges for the European Union is in respect of Poland, and we're running out of time, I apologize, but we've got to call...
Well, maybe they are running out of time, hopefully.
Okay.
The ones that are not respecting the rule of law.
You're looking at the rule of law, and the European Union has to do more.
And the Council of Europe too. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I apologize, the clock has caught us out, but it's been a great pleasure. We've
My
covered
pleasure.
so much. We needed twice the time. It wasn't allocated, but thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.